Okay, so take it away, Mr. Jeche. Thank you.
Cool. So just want to make sure that I get it right so that I don't get the time wrong. Cool. All right. Hello, all. My name is David Jeche, and I'm going to be giving you guys a talk today about open source engineering. It's intended to be a continuum of a previous talk that I've done before. As I learn new things, I'll be feeding that back to the community. So first and foremost, let me start by saying that I am by no means qualified to be giving this talk to some of the people within this room. And the only reason that I say that is that, of course, we have people in here that have been working on open source projects for a very long time, contributing, so they have a deeper understanding around the workings of that particular environment and mechanisms. But ideally, my intent is to share an ideology, philosophy, and mentality that I hope will help enlighten you and help enrich the experience that you have as you work on your daily work and as you progress into this weird world of what's blurred as open source. So let me start by saying that technology is the single most important component in our evolutionary process within this reality. And what do I mean by that? Is that technology accelerates our evolutionary process. It enables us to learn quicker. It enables us to communicate, which then enables us to form more communities, amongst other things, including sharing ideas. And I think that is fundamental for all types of technology, whether it be food technology, health technology, just general science, chemistry, whatever the mechanism. It's still a sense of technology. And in that, I believe that it's relevant to move from looking at technology and then looking at information systems. So information systems are the bedrock for the success of any and all mass scale operations. So in humanity as a whole, as we evolve, we gain and attain information, and then when we gain and attain this information, we then formulate a method of managing it, and these are the systems that we intend to create. So regardless of who you are, where you are, what time frame it is, information systems always get developed regardless of the situation. So one example would be the origins of numbers. Although we don't really know, we know that in around about 3,500 BC, numbers were available in Mesopotamia. And through that, they were using a base 60 system, which is incomprehensible. I don't know what they were doing with that, or maybe they didn't know how to calculate properly. But then again, we move from that and we go also to Egypt, which is another civilization where we see that numbers have been in use, base 10 from 3,100 BC. So this is just humans evolving, and we always arrive at the same states, the same environments, just different ways of utilizing those information systems. So from that, information systems are more geared towards knowledge management. But then when we look at source code is the blueprint that enables our ideas to flourish. What do I mean by this? As in, source code is just bits and bytes that we have developed over time by harnessing the power of electricity through the process of exploring transistors. And through that process, we have come to the realization that through the utilization of something similar to non-volatile RAM, source code is an infinite resource. Like, you can just copy and paste it and it will never degrade regardless of the situation, which I think is quite brilliant. And we can store it as well, which is also very important. So it's an infinite creation, and also it's mystical in nature in how it operates, in that, like, you have bits and bytes, right? These are the fundamental components, and those bits and bytes are similar to binary systems described previously in our past. So when you look at yin and yang, that's just a bit and a byte. And at the same time, when you look at the Hermetic philosophies that are geared towards sort of, there's like 7 of them, 7 principles, and polarity seems to be one of those, and that's just analog information, bits and bytes turning off at different frequencies or with different use cases. So again, software is a set of bits and bytes, and we need to have a method of controlling the infinite copying of these bits and bytes, right? Because if it's infinite, it can be copied an infinite number of times and it can never degrade. We have to have a method of managing how we distribute those copies or how we operate those particular copies. In essence, because again, it's a resource. So a definition of open source licensing, which open source licensing is the method that we use to govern these bits and bytes that can be copied infinite number of times. We use these open source licenses in order to enable or communicate to people how they can interact with that particular software without getting in trouble, because that's always a relevant thing. You have to respect the creator's development of that particular source code. So a definition of an open source license is an open source license is a type of license for computer software and other products that allows the source code, blueprint, or design to be used, modified, and or shared under defined terms or conditions. This allows end users and commercial companies to review and modify the source code, blueprint, or design for their own customization, curiosity, or troubleshooting needs. So when you have open source software, it enables you to do a lot of different things, while this definition within itself is suitable for a specific set of licenses. It's not accustomed to all of them, because some of them you do get situations where you can't modify and can't do other things. So, you know, one important thing is that if anybody here has ever created a GitHub repository, I think it's mandatory to pick a license style when you basically register, and as such, that's a method, or that's a show of that exchange between individuals within the developer community. So you state your states there, you define how people can use your code. And I like the MIT license myself because through it, and I trust MIT people, like who doesn't trust MIT people? They're really smart academics, so it's like they're really cool and they've done like really, really cool stuff. So in their license, I'm sure that it's there for a reason, and it's meant to enable humanity to do really great things. Like, for example, we wouldn't have PlayStation without MIT, because FreeBSD wouldn't be a thing. So we always have to take that into general consideration. So I think next I'm just gonna sort of delve a little bit deeper into the concept of, so there's some points that they say that are relevant in better understanding like what an open source license should be. So it's like free distribution, that's not really a must, but that was one of the key points. The source code is also a must. Integrity of the author source code, no discrimination against persons or groups, no discrimination against fields or endeavors. License must be not specific to a product. So the license is not geared towards the product, but rather the source code itself. And also it must not restrict the use of other software. And the license must be, in general, technologically neutral. And those are some of the key bits or key components that underpin what is, in general, considered an open source license. So just to delve a little bit deeper into the philosophy of open source. So the origins of the open source philosophy are a bit vague, because if you search it up on Google, all you see is Ubuntu, obviously, because you don't see anything else, because Ubuntu is the operating system, and of course that's going to be SEO'd. And so it sort of overwrites some of the origin and, you know, to say about beginning. So in essence, I think it's really important to outline that open source methodologies or philosophies or business models are not communism. Rather, they're kind of like containers of mini communisms running on top of capitalism. Is probably the best way to put it. But it is not. It's not communism in nature. And what we'll explore, we'll look at how the how sort of is a mindset developed by the Ubuntu people. So the concept itself has been tested in production for a very, very long time, and it was developed through a natural sort of evolutionary way of living in communities, I guess. But if you want to look that up, you can to gain a deeper understanding about the Ubuntu people, and there they are, and there's the little circle. They're obviously not technical in any way, but in their approach, they had nature and they had resources, and all they had was each other. So they had to learn and develop in order to survive in these particular in environments, in essence, and that is their circle. So I'd just like to read two snippets from some of the people that we're studying, those people over there. Cool, and I am 10 minutes in. All right, so that's so these are a bit of snippets from people that were either Ubuntu natives that became westernized, or people that came from the West to study them in essence. And here's one, and it'll sound familiar. A person with Ubuntu is open and available to others. Affirming of others does not feel threatened that others are able and good, based from a proper self-assurance that comes from knowing that he or she belongs in a greater whole and is diminished when others are humiliated, or diminished when others are tortured or oppressed. So that's one of the concepts and philosophy. So you can begin to understand that when you look at the way that we share and assist each other in general online. This is because that we don't want to see somebody else struggle with having to figure out how to, how to do a particular task, or how to or get stuck trying to solve the same problems. And this is why we share the source code, in order to enable people to not get stuck in the same situations that we've been in. And another one is a traveler through a country would stop at the village, and he didn't have to ask for food or for water. Once he stops, the people give him food and attend him. That is one aspect of Ubuntu, but it will have various aspects. Ubuntu does not mean that people should not address themselves. The question, therefore, is, are you going to do so in order to enable the community around you to be able to improve? And I think that's a very important thing. It's a bit hazy in stating it, but all I can say about that is just imagine Stack Overflow. Then it pretty much falls into place in that nobody has to help anyone on Stack Overflow, but we see people that are struggling and having problems. And sometimes we see the same question, we have the answer to the problem, sometimes they don't help. But those people that are a part of the community, that are a part of our circle, will give the person the answer, and will help them with the problem regardless of the situation. They don't have to, but they do that. Now, there's a bunch of pioneers of this mindset in the West, and I don't think that they knew that they were doing it. Just through their thing, through whatever they were doing, they just came to the realization that this concept works, and this concept is beneficial to us. So again, these are some of them: Open Source Initiative, Open Knowledge Foundation, the Linux Foundation, the Apache Foundation, Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and a bunch of other ones. But there's so many of them that it could become a problem. However, I believe that we're all in a race condition because we want people to use our software. We want our software to last the test of time. Like, you want your software to still be there in 200 years' time, in 1,000 years' time. You want some name of it. It might not be present. We might be living in big data cities or whatever, but at least you know that in that corner of that cupboard somewhere, there's my Elasticsearch instance, and I worked at Elasticsearch, or whatever the case may be. So that's the scenario that we're trying to get to. We want our software to last the test of time. So that is that in pretty much in essence, but this is my general concept. So next, I think it's time to sort of explore the business aspect of things and how open source and business interact. And to do that, I think we will have to do something a bit bizarre, where we're gonna have to create a structure for understanding how business is organized in essence. So a long time ago, we didn't know what was going on. We lived in this reality that we couldn't really explain or even comprehend. So in the Greek philosophy, they came up with a concept of trying to understand the structure that is our reality. They formulated elements. Now we know, and I'm sure that they knew too, that elements are more greater and are deeper than these 4 or 5. But then again, they use this in order to better understand the wider structure of our reality. So again, it's water, fire, earth, and air. And the fifth one is the ether. They never really spoke about that. You get stoned for talking about, you get in big trouble. Probably death penalty for that at some point in time back then. But that was the fifth element that they kept secret. And as such, with this, what we can do is we can take this and help understand organizations as a whole by performing abstractions to that, and then enabling us to understand how these things sort of fit together or how they can operate. So, for example, the software being water, software is always fluid, it's always changing, always dynamic. We have the waterfall model, which is a method of delivering software, and as such, that's why software is water. Business is fire, in that business is the driving force. So if you imagine a train, you have your water, and then you want the train to move. So you put some fire, which is your marketing, your sales team, or your other teams, and then they enable the transmutation of the water or the software into steam, thus enabling the business to move. Then you have earth, which is the hardware. So you've got your devices. They are relevant and they're a must to have in an environment. Even though people say that serverless, it's still someone else's server. So even in that situation, you still need hardware for the teams and other mechanisms to move through. And there's also the open source hardware foundation, I believe, which is also a very relevant component in this. And 3D printing stuff, so many innovations going on with that I can't even get into. And we have people operations who are like air, because without them, there would be no business. There would be no organization. And they are what brings everything together and binds it together and enables it to flourish. And the ether component is just like the family, everything else that you do when you're not at work. And I think that all these things are very relevant to enable businesses to succeed, and they're important things to be aware of within a business because, again, they allow people to be more productive, even though you don't have to focus on that. But by giving gift cards and vouchers and stuff, you sort of help enrich that. So with these things, so the Open Knowledge Foundation as well could also help within the business aspect of things. And if you have this, everything's relying on each other. So even though you have open source software, you're still reliant on all the other components, which we are not aware of yet, nor have we started properly paying attention to. Like, I don't know if there's any open source people operation stuff. Like, I don't know how that works. But in essence, in understanding this, I hope that formulates a sort of methodology around business management and understanding how that open source stuff can sort of interlink in ensuring that businesses are successful. So I'm going to get to the section of why are people developing open source software. Like, I thought that there was a universe somewhere and people were just throwing their garbage software out and it was just ending up in GitHub and then people would just pick it up. like I thought that's what was happening. So should people develop open source software to make money or not to make money? I would say definitely to make money. However, money shouldn't be the driving factor because it's never been. I think that it's an unaware spiritual practice where people they get possessed and then they start craving over commits and pull requests and that type of thing. I don't know if anyone's ever had it, but there are times where you're like, I'm not going to sleep until I get this thing to work. And as such, I think that's actually very important because sometimes you might not be making money from it, but you can do at a later date. So I think that in that you do want to make money, but you got to be careful with it because if you let money drive you, then at the end of the day, if nobody wants to buy your software, then you just wasted God knows how many hours on that. So do we develop for the planet or our self-interest, which the planet can benefit from? I would say develop for your own self-interest, and then the planet can overall benefit from the work that you put out there to generally contribute. Nobody told you to do open source stuff. It just happened. And if you felt like you were doing work, then you wouldn't do it, to be honest. So it's just this thing that just happens. I can't really explain much more than that. But sometimes it's like company policy. Sometimes it's chasing the community because you might be lonely. So the best way to interact with other people is through contributions and PRs and other things. And I think that in the overall future of it, I think reputation points are a thing as well. And I think that while we have black kids that are out there killing people for reputation points and getting 24 years in prison, it'd be so much cooler if we had black kids that were fighting over PRs and merging those in order to gain a different insight or changing that methodology. I don't know who's got the brainwashing stuff, but if anyone does, that'd be cool on a mass scale to change it so that it's that. And are we by any means responsible through our actions for the state and outcome of the world? Probably not. But if you are an open source enthusiast, if you're a technology evangelist, then in essence you would come to the understanding that in the long run, cloud providers are going to become like Jedis, in essence, and they're going to provide services that are going to power our cities. And we won't have that many people doing what we do today, in essence, so we will tend to have that slimmed down and then things will generally change. But that's what will probably end up like, SREs as Jedis in the future at some point in time. And that'll be to protect, and they'll be above countries, unfortunately, because there's going to be problems there if they're not, because again, it's a complicated situation. So, you know, this bit in the Bible is a relevant section to me. I think when God said to Cain, "Where is Abel, your brother?" Now, I don't know if you've ever read the Bible, but basically that's what pretty much happened. It's like we are all on an infinite journey to tomorrow, and we're all traveling on this journey together. And if we don't make it together, then we won't make it to the wherever that shiny one is going, and then the dark one is like the other one where it's just like probably just ends somewhere not good. But yeah, that's pretty much the same concept and ideology that we're in today, because again, mistakes can happen apparently, and things can go wrong apparently at certain times. You know how it is. Current state of affairs in our world, everyone's drowning in debt at the present moment in time. G8, I don't know how these African people in the middle of nowhere manage to gain so much debt for themselves. But again, I think it's important to say that mindsets and states that no longer serve our best interests are the biggest deterrent to the full success of the planet. And as we grow, as we learn things, and as we move on, we become more wiser, and as such, we are liable to punishment. So you know how it is. Like if you're like 10 and you do something wrong, you might get a slap on the wrist. But if you're older and you know and you're wiser, then it can get a bit more complicated in terms of, I don't know, the UN or whatever, or NATO, or whoever is responsible for governing this environmental planet. And in essence, I think, so these are some of the problems which I'll just run through really quickly. So people want to be rewarded for the work that they do for contributing to systems. Cash flow in developing countries, although rich in minerals but poor in finances, is a very important thing, because we are going to need that debt in order to add some padding in different places. People are protecting while not seeing the value in knowledge and wisdom, and governments are large monoliths that become difficult to manage, and things get split up and people start doing whatever they want to do. And that's a problem. So how do we solve those problems? So first, it's like a method to link commits to proof of work leading to payments, future requests, plus bug fixes as open source works. So for example, if you take source code D, you take a blockchain, pick one that's really fast, you take a Git client and you merge those three together, you can create a system that enables people to generally, finishing point, people to generally work in a gig economy type of thing, where people submit PRs where there's security bugs, and then you fix those like bug bounties, but instead you get paid to fix security bugs that then get contributed back into the community and shared money. And again, through technology, we can accelerate rate of development, education, automation, and financial understanding in developing countries, thus enabling them to flourish. Thus, we don't need to pay them so much more money, because if you teach a man to fish, you won't have to give him fishes all the time. And I think that's pretty much it. Developing governments can utilize this technology to accelerate health. All right, thank you. And I would just like to say this, right? As a final note, you know, they used to say a long time ago that every organization should be scared of a kid with a laptop in his bedroom, since that may is considered a security risk, some hacker thing. Personally, I would say be far more scared of a hungry African black kid who knows how to write C with a Raspberry Pi. Sorry, everyone.
I really don't know how to wrap.
Sorry.
That's a wrap.
Really well excited. Very, very interesting.
Cool.
Well done, David.
No problem. Thank you.